Let me put you on the spot right off the bat. Congressman Devin Nunes, do you know who started the Fireside Chat?
Not you.
You should be.
A guy like you.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt, at a time that our country was
Saturday nights, right?
Saturday nights. He was trying to calm the nation. So wouldn't that be a good theme for us, to calm the nation?
I agree. These are trying times that we're in right now, but there's going to be a lot of challenges in our country going into the future because of the way that the country is polarized right now, and also because of the way the news media reports on events, because essentially the news media is non-existent for one side or the other. There's very few that are honest and actually doing their job and being paid to do a job for a particular special interest, and that's a challenge that we have right now. But thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today, and of course be online for all the folks that couldn't be here today. But I look forward to having this chat.
You've had the opportunity recently to have several chats with people that call themselves news media. Do you have any kind of summation of what you feel about that?
Well, it's sad what it's come to now, and I think for those of you farmers and ranchers get this, because for a long time the media has been completely not just unfair but dishonest. So those of us that are in agriculture, we understand this, but it's now reached a fever pitch nationally, and so by some degree the new media or the outlets where you can reach mass amounts of people has made this happen even faster, and you're seeing the old legacy media is falling apart. However, it creates an opportunity for those of us who are in industries that don't get treated fairly to communicate to folks. But at the same time, it makes it harder to reach people who are in the middle or who perhaps don't pay attention that closely until it's time to vote. And that's the biggest challenge that we have. If you have the left controls, they control the universities, they control, for the most part, the court systems, the bureaucracies. And so for when you figure that about 40% of America, maybe a little over, depending on what state you were in, is conservative, you probably have equal number that would be left-wing to now even socialist. You have a lot of candidates who are running on a socialist agenda. I'm not making that up. That's really being discussed right now about Democratic politicians running as socialists, labeling themselves as the socialist in the race. So, which is something I've never seen in my time in politics. So it'll be something new for this year. And then you have those folks in the middle. And those are the folks that we have to reach, and it makes it very difficult with what I just said, with the bureaucracy, the universities, the schools, all being controlled by the left. And that's what we're up against.
Disclaimer when you actually do make stuff up?
Me or them?
No, you said you're making that up, like as if the rest of the stuff you're making up. So I just want to know if you're going to give a disclaimer.
Oh.
I got a feeling I'll tell you when you make some fake. You just said that it was 2010 that you and I did radio together.
I thought that was right.
8 years ago.
Yeah.
And I remember clearly our topic of discussion that day was water rights.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
8 years later, Congressman changed.
Things worse in terms of the Obama hack the courts. You continue to see, because of the control of the United States Republicans, dies in the Senate because of this 60-vote threshold that we have to have in the Senate. And that's a challenge because, I agree, look, in the Constitution, question, senators have a right to filibuster. However, the thing that I've always said is I think we've passed the time where they can just hide and not have to go down and take the Senate floor and actually have to debate and discuss So what they've done with the 60-vote rule is nothing ever even starts on the House floor until they know that they have the votes. So as long as 41 senators will say, nope, I'm not coming out of my office, then the debate never starts. And that's a real challenge. We pile up bills from the House of Representatives, and they're sitting on the desk of the Senate. But you can see today, this is in the news. Mike Pompeo, former, actually probably a neighbor of yours in the Midwest. He was a longtime congressman from Kansas. Now he's the director of the CIA. He served with me on the Intelligence Committee, great guy. You have almost an unprecedented action where the Foreign Relations Subcommittee in the Senate may not even vote to get him out of the committee so that he can have a vote on the floor. So you may, for the first time ever, have to see the Senate actually just waive the committee process and bring the nomination straight to the floor. Now look, this isn't, I'm not picking on any particular agency, but you're not talking about, the head of the USDA or the head of the Interior Department or the head of the Small Business Administration. This is the head of our foreign relations for the United States of America. This is about national security. This is the person who will run the State Department, and they won't even vote him out of their own subcommittee. So that's where we're at here in this country with the politics and with the process. There's no question it's polarized and it's broken, and I think you need to look no farther than the day-to-day news on what the left is willing to go to stop legislation, and this even stop simple nominations for very qualified individuals in this country to serve the President of the United States.
So the question was California water, and you went to federal challenges. Isn't the answer to California water access to all and the water rights a California and a Stanislaus County issue?
Well, I would say that, so water in California is actually twofold. There's there are state issues, and then there are federal issues. So why is the federal government involved? The federal government is involved for a couple reasons in California. Number one, the federal government owns a lot of the lands in the state of California. So a lot of the water originates in those lands, in those water projects. So that's number one. Number two, you have laws on the books that are being used, and I would say even abused, like the Endangered Species Act, that are being applied to federal water projects, stateside state water projects. So you have both the federal water and the state water that is impacted by federal statutes and federal laws that are causing the shortfall of water in the state. So currently today I was just told that there is 100, even in a year like this, so this has been a dry year here in California, but there's 100,000 acre feet a day going out to the ocean right now. 100,000 acre feet a day. And that's been happening for the last month. So you're likely going to see that happen. 100,000 acre feet a day, my guess is until probably mid-July to early August. And the shortfall really in the state of California, you're only talking about 2.5 to 3.5 million acre feet. So you're only talking about, we wouldn't even need very much of that water, even in a drought year, and the state would have plenty of water. Nobody would have to idle farmland. Nobody would have to have dry grass down in Los Angeles. None of that would happen if the laws were fixed and fairly implemented with some common sense.
So what you just verified is really the core behind what brought us all together, and that is property rights. But you're speaking to the fact that some groups, individuals, maybe elected officials, have figured out how to use tools such as Endangered Species Act to protect the Delta smelt, whatever the case may be, the sage grouse, prairie chicken, whatever the case may be, to remove our property rights.
That's right.
Are we turning that around with the current administration?
So
So that's a great point. I always equate this even in Congress, because a lot of we just went through the federal and state issues dealing with water, and so you'll have a lot of conservatives who will say, well, this is a state's issue, and I have to say, look, no, this is bigger than a state issue or even a federal water project issue. This is really about people's right to private property, and if you take their water, you're effectively taking their right to their property. And I always make the argument that water is a property right. If you have water that belongs on your property, that flows through your property, that has been there for centuries, it is in fact, if you bought the rights to that, someone can't or should not be able to come in and take that away from you. And that's what you're seeing. That's what you see happening. It really is a most fundamental basic right in our Constitution, the ability for government to come in and use laws to what is effectively to take away your private property. And I have to, because most people don't understand, in California we're one of the few places that is all or pretty much all irrigated agriculture. Most parts of the United States, and even for the world that matter, they don't have irrigated agriculture. And so sometimes you have to explain the link between the land and the water and why those together are in fact your property right. There's even in this part of we've had a lot of challenges here, which I'm sure you guys have already discussed this, but with government coming in, using the Endangered Species Act to tell you what you can or cannot do on your land. And that's that's a different issue than the water issue that you're talking to me about, but there's a whole issue of what can you actually use your land for? Do you have a right to farm that land?
So the first U.S. representative from California that I asked that question on the radio was a feller by the name of Richard Pombo. You ever heard of him?
I do, I know. He used to wear a hat just like yours.
In fact, he took a stand to fix the Endangered Species Act, so these violations of property rights would not erode. That unelected him. How do you maintain the stand that you've shared with us here today and continue to represent the people from your district who want you to accomplish these restructuring projects?
Well, there was going back to that political race, there were a lot of reasons why that happened. One reason why is half of his district was taken out of the valley and was put over into the Bay Area. So that was a challenge for him. I think those of us who represent the valley here, the San Joaquin Valley, this is an area much different than what you will find in Hollywood or San Francisco. And so our constituents...
We should add on that, by the way.
We should. But our constituency that not going to tolerate people coming from Hollywood or San Francisco with their views on land use, private property rights, Endangered Species Act, that sort of thing. And one of the things that we've done since Mr. Pombo left Congress, which is over a decade ago now, what we try to do is, instead of taking the whole law and trying to fix it, which is what he was attempting to do, we're trying to actually take individual, let's say, challenges with the law, where the law is unfairly implemented, and try to take and highlight that. That's what we've done with the water issue. So with the water issue, when they come in and they've applied the Endangered Species Act the wrong way, we passed legislation in the House that says, no. The federal government decides what this is. If you're not improving the habitat, if species, in fact, are not being impacted by the changes that are being made by the court decisions and the implementation of the law, Congress wrote the law. Congress should be able to go in and fix that part of the law to make sure that the projects run efficiently, effectively, and by the way, to try to benefit both farmers, land, and the species. And the absurdity of what's happening in this state is that you see the challenges with the species that are supposedly supposed to be protected, but in fact the delta smelt that you mentioned is arguably at its worst shape that it's ever been in.
Because we protect the predators when we think we're protecting the species, which increases predation.
That's right. One of the reasons why that the delta smelt perhaps it's hard to say what the only reason is, but I think the largest reason is that we're protecting bass fish, which is, I'm not a fisherman, but lots of people like to fish for bass up in the Delta just a few miles away from here. Nobody's against that, but we have to realize that if you're going to have a vibrant sport fishing capability here in this region, and we're going to stock those supplies, and we're going to ensure that there are plenty of fish for sport fishermen to go and fish for. Perhaps one of the challenges will be that the Delta smelt, which is native, and the bass is not. If the bass eats the smelt, you're going to have to make that decision. So, as an ag guy, I'm not advocating for us to go get rid of all the bass fish. I think there's nothing wrong with bass fish being in the Delta. But we shouldn't penalize agriculture and penalize people who actually need the water and use the water, which, by the way, is nearly every single Californian uses this water that flows through this region and gets moved to the Bay Area, to the south. You shouldn't penalize because the Delta smelt population is going down. Don't just curtail pumping when you have no evidence that the pumping is doing the damn thing to those smelt. And that's the point that we're trying to make in the Congress over and over, the legislation that we've passed, is that, look, let's implement the law the right way so that species are protected, farmers are protected, and humans are protected.
We haven't done a damn thing. That was a good pun. I hope they caught that, because you dam up the river. These guys are too tired.
That's a good idea, too.
Yeah, I'm trying to get them loose up here.
It's almost lunchtime.
It is about lunchtime. We've been talking for 18 minutes. Has anybody else interviewed in the last 6 months for 18 minutes and not mentioned the word Russia?
Well, it was coming, I'm sure.
Oh, I don't care about Russia. I will get to Russia. But one other thing you
Russia doesn't care about Endangered Species Act.
No, they're probably funneling money into making sure that we still have an Endangered Species Act.
Well, there is, I will say that there are some interesting ties that you do see between the hard left, the far left, and multiple interests across the globe.
Yeah, I want to get back to that. As a member of the Trump Ag Advisory Committee, myself, we have a certain level of frustration that we haven't drained the swamp quicker, that we still have old school bureaucrats in the positions of decision making. How do we get that fixed? Because obviously there's a bigger plug in the swamp than anybody anticipated.
That's right. So it's tough to actually drain the swamp. So then the president's finding that out. I mean, he hasn't even been able to begin to start his presidency without a cloud hanging over him that has essentially been because of the bureaucracy that put this cloud over him. You're finding that out now by the situation that you see on television every day. So first of all, the left is very creative, right? When you own the court systems, you own them, so they pack the courts, they pack the bureaucracies, they control the universities, they control the media. When you have all that, it's very, very tough to actually go in and change the bureaucracy. So even when you find, so you have to remember, for years and years and years, you have to be left in order to get promoted in the bureaucracy. So many people within the government bureaucracies, and you can pick one, it doesn't matter which one you pick, they're all pretty much the same. If you don't adhere to the policies of the mainstream media, the left, the Democratic Party, the universities, hard left, you didn't get promoted. You probably left the government. So many people that are good people that work in these government agencies, they leave. Or they just decide, look, I'm not going to speak up because if I speak up, I'm not going to get promoted. So it's not just an issue of that people at the highest levels are left. They may not be, but they also know that they're afraid to speak up. So with all that, people have rights, right? People have rights in these agencies. So they've been given very, very lenient rights. So if you're in most of these departments, you can't, but you can't be fired. Even when they get there, if you can get the Senate to put them in, which that Secretary of State, as I said earlier, when you either the challenge of draining the swamp.
Russia.
So you are chairman of the Intelligence Committee, correct?
Yes.
And access to information that maybe was not very comforting to Americans.
Can you put all
The biggest challenge for those of us on the Intelligence Committee was that we had an open investigation into Russia for a really long time. It was myself who had warned the Obama administration about the Russian threat. I had been warned many of the same people who are involved in this fiasco, that were, the bureaucracy at the time, that they weren't doing enough on Russia. In fact, I called it the biggest failure since 9/11 was our inability to understand Putin's plans and intentions. That was in the spring of 2016. So fast forward a few months when Hillary Clinton loses the election, and then all of a sudden some of us get called, Russian traitors to Russia, and we were aiding and abetting Russia. I mean, really nutty stuff, right? But the mainstream media is so corrupt, so dishonest, that they never even covered that. So right away, right after the election, all you heard was the Russians were involved in the election. And I came out and said, look, yeah, Russians are bad, Russians do bad things, by the way, we told you about it, but I don't have any evidence that Donald Trump and his team were colluding with Russians on this. And I mean, you would have thought that, by then the media, 90% of them, they spent all day, all night attacking me. Why? Because I was controlling the one piece of government separate from the executive branch where we have the ability to get to the truth. It's hard, but we have the ability to get to the truth because we're not run by the executive branch or the judiciary branch of government. So when we started investigating, I said, look, we'll look into Russian collusion, but at that point, we knew, but we couldn't tell all of you, we couldn't tell the American public, that it took a lot in order to make information public. Because one of the things they do, information, which classified information, and it was only because many of what you read, who were the people who were their own writing, they were the information. Now, most of the time, misused and I think described wrong and used in manners that weren't accurate. Especially when we found out that the dirt used to not the fact that they opened up an investigation using our foreign intelligence capabilities, which are not of our democracy. They use to invest in our nation's history. The media, they are, and if you the media are a piece of the Democratic Party, you're fooling yourself. And so I think the mistake that a lot of people have made, I probably made it in the past too, which is that you try to reason with them. It's not going to make a difference. You're blue in the face. That's the truth. If you think that they're not here, land farmers, people that believe in property rights, covering this right now, I'm sure,
to mock you, make fun of you, call you cowpokes, say, look at you guys in the cowboy hats. They today. Anything short of that, you're wasting your time if you think you're going to go way into having even be not even fair as to the effects that socialist left-wing on people.
Could, for the remainder of our conversation, you stop riding the fence? That was a joke. Good grief, people.
All right. You comfortable with me going and pulling a Phil Donahue?
Sure. You know, what do you do, throw the chair around? Or...
So while I'm making my to
Yeah, I think that I was talking earlier, I'm really, we need a free press in this country, and I think we all knew they were wrong. We didn't know that they were so confused. And I think if you now see, when you look at the ownership of these media organizations, when you have 90% of them owned by hard billionaires, it's very, very difficult, I think, to ever fix this. So you have to understand what the battlefield looks like and understand what we're up against moving into the future.
So, if you have a question,
state your name and where you're from. And I'll hold the microphone.
You hold the microphone. Forrest Sprague, I'm from Artois, California, Artois, if you've had a French class. Congressman, just an observation first and then a compliment. My observation has been that when elected officials are running for election campaigns, whether it's city council, board of supervisors, Congress, or whatever, they are promising that when they get elected, they will represent their constituents through their government. And too many times, all of us have watched, once they get elected, they're there for a little bit of time, they start representing their government to their constituents. I want to commend you, sir. I watch you all the time, and I want to commend you for continuing to represent your constituents to our government. Thank you.
Thank you.
well, that was that's Phil Donahue at his best right there, buddy. Yeah. Who are you?
John DeWardy, Modesto, California. An action that could have happened. Is there any substantial?
I'm not sure. I'll start with that. I have to deal with lawyers every day, many more than I would have ever liked to or even thought I'd ever have to. So when the special prosecutor was appointed, many of us thought, perfect, this is going to be great because they're going to quickly come in, and I think this was the design originally of having a special prosecutor, the ability to have a special prosecutor. Someone seen as non-biased, come in quickly. They would look and see that there was no collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, because we had not found any. I think it was a far-fetched conspiracy theory from the beginning, but we had looked, hadn't seen anything, but it'd be great for them to look and verify what we had found. At the same time, there were felonies that were committed, very serious felonies. The most notable one was the leak of the phone call between General Flynn and the Russian ambassador. Felony, serious capabilities, should have had every single FBI agent on trying to bust that leak, because it was the highest level, right? Not a damn thing was done. So months went by, nothing was coming out. The special prosecutor loaded up with a bunch of partisan Democrats, which is hard to believe that you would end up with a dozen people that are known, left this to some degree. I think a lot of red flags went up, and it remains that way. The red flags have gone up, especially with what happened in the last few weeks. I think we're in an absolute fight for the future of this country. And the left, the Democrats, they all know it, and they're going to stop at nothing to make sure that they try to bring this government down, is what it looks like they're trying to do. And we're here, and we only have a small part of government, but in the legislative branch, we are just trying to get to the truth. What is the truth? I mean, if there's some evidence, and I keep saying this, if anybody of you have evidence that Trump colluded with the Russians, bring it to me, because I'd love to see it. But we looked for 15 months, never found anything. What we did find actual evidence that there was collusion between the Democratic Party and the Russians. Everybody forgets that. So we're supposed to be looking at collusion between Trump and Russians. Well, how is it that if you hire a law firm, that's what the Clinton campaign and DNC hired, a law firm that hired a firm, investigative firm, Fusion GPS, that then hired a former British spy, who then went and hired, supposedly, if you believe the Steele dossier, Russians. That's what happened. That's collusion. Just because you hire a lawyer who hires a firm who hires a spy who goes and talks to Russians doesn't mean that you didn't collude with them. The Clinton campaign and the DNC knew that Steele was talking directly to Russians, which, by the way, if they were, I don't know, we don't know exactly who they were talking about. If they were actually getting high-level information, it was probably coming from Russian intelligence services. It had to have, if it was legit. Because Russia is a police state. It is a dictatorship. A czar, some people call it. They control everything out of it. You think that some person is going to go around and talk to some former British spy and get up information that Putin had on political actors in the United States? Most people aren't going to give that information up. It's just not going to happen. Because they won't be around very long if they do in Russia. So, anyway, one more.
And I'm answer.
Congressman, you started your talk by...
You want to tell us who you are?
Sorry, Roger Savory, San Diego. You started your talk by describing that there's absolute polarity. Now, in our Constitution, we created Congress, Senate, the House, the judiciary, and the President. Everything throughout our Constitution breaks everything into three different venues so that you always have discussion. You never have the left and the right and polarity. The only place we don't see that is in our political parties, where we literally just have two powerhouses that are both bound and determined to rule out and kill any chances of a third party getting established. Is there any thought to breaking the polarity by actually encouraging a third party on behalf of both parties?
Well, I would think that... So I think there has capability in this country. I think there's a bigger problem here. You have to, just look, for me, looking at the battlefield, you have to left in this country. If you look at certain states, there's no option left. California, I mean, the Republican Party basically has no money, has no ability to operate. The Democrats it's very convenient. People who have money curry favor. They also have the so they run all of their party apparatus by taking government money, giving it to an employee, taking that money away in dues. The danger here is, and you see this across all parts of the globe, is not so much that we don't have enough parties, where you end up with a powerful party, like the Democratic Party is in this country. I mean, they control everything in this country. Everything. And the worst thing you can do is have splintered opposition. If you have splintered opposition, you get nowhere. That's one of the challenges we see in Venezuela right now, where there's 5 or 6 different opposition leaders. And so I look at this not as, I look at the Republican Party as the only avenue and the only venue to try to rein in the party that really controls the entire country. I mean, it's not just, I mentioned California. I mean, we can list off a whole bunch of states that are just like California and becoming worse. And, granted, every once in a while, every blue moon, you'll get a governor elected, and that's usually because the Democrats nominate somebody like they did last year in Hillary Clinton, or last time in Hillary Clinton. So if the Democrats nominate somebody that's a really bad candidate, you might be able to get lucky at the polls. And that's what I think we just got really lucky at the polls in 2016. But moving forward, our big challenge is fighting the left. And I think that anybody who's on the right, no matter what you are, you have to realize you have to be under the same umbrella and try to marshal your forces in places. And, we're on the front lines here. I'm here from San Diego, so you know. If we don't marshal our forces here in this state, we're going to become extinct. I mean, look, there are, and just I'll close with this, but we've in this valley, most of the farmers, I would say, most of the elected officials have given up any hope that we're going to continue to farm what is the most fertile farmland in the world. You have people who have essentially thrown up their hands and said, well, we're just going to have to take 1 million acres out of production. And that's what happens if you have one-party control with no organized opposition and no power. But thank you all for what you all do. It's very much appreciated. What you guys are doing on the front lines is very, very important in order to not only get the state back on the right track, but also get this country on the right track. Thank you all very much for having me today.